The ROTC program formed at Howard in the early 1920s, and formal military training at Howard returned to campus in 1918 with the start of the Student Army Training Corps. And this was started at the behest of students at Howard who wanted to make sure that black soldiers were trained to be more than just infantrymen in the military.
The Reserve Officer Training Corps is one of the primary ways that airmen are commissioned as officers in the United States Air Force. It's been around since the Air Force inception in the 1940s, and it's the #1 producer of officers for the Air Force. You also have the Air Force Academy, which is very selective and a lot smaller, and Officer Training School, but ROTC produces the most. And in that same regard, Howard University is the largest producer of African American candidates for one single source. So we're very important to the diversity of the Air Force. The airmen who went to Tuskegee, Alabama to train were actually initially in school at Howard University and went through various programs, including some of the programs in engineering before they actually went down for flight training. There's a long history of African Americans involved in the Air Force and the Army here on Howard's campus. One of our most distinguished alumni right now is the chairman of USAA Bank, General Lester Lyles, a retired 4-star general. So the legacy that Howard has in the Air Force goes way back and continues even until the 2000s.
Army ROTC in general has essentially two parts to its mission. Its first part of the mission is to recruit, develop, educate, and inspire senior ROTC cadets to commission as second lieutenants for the total Army force. The other portion of that is partnering with high schools through their junior ROTC program, and that's to create great citizens.
Commissionees, post.
We're actually at the 100th year anniversary of Howard Army ROTC program. So it actually started in 1917 as started training in 1917, but the program was actually founded in 1918. Since that, we've had a lot of great leaders that come through here. A lot of flag officers, a lot of leaders within the civilian community. One of the officers was the late Togo West, who just passed recently. We have a lot of generals. We have a general officer who retired, who came from Howard Medical School, General George Alexander. We have General Gaskell. We have General after general. So there's a long lineage of general officers or senior leaders that have come through the Howard program, and we're very proud of that.
The idea to bring military education to Howard started at the urging of Howard trustee Joel Spingard, and he spoke with students at a rally in Rankin Chapel, and he said that they should really lead the effort to get African Americans involved in World War I. And they took that charge and formed the Committee of Concerned College Men, and they pushed the War Department to open the training camp at Fort Des Moines in Iowa. And this was the first training camp for African American soldiers in the history of the military. And so after the creation of that camp, they said, well, you have student Army training camps. We need to have one here on the campus of Howard University to train African American soldiers. And so that was really the impetus that brought military training back to campus, because there was the idea that as a school for African Americans, Howard University needed to be involved in the training of African American soldiers. So the desire to have ROTC on the campus of Howard University was basically the same drive that drove African Americans to join the military throughout the entire existence of the United States. This idea that we're going to show our patriotism, and by showing our patriotism, we'll show that we are worthy of gaining equal rights. They wanted to show that they were Americans, that they were proud of their country, and that they were willing to serve, willing to die, and that meant that they deserved their rights as citizens of the United States. American Revolution, they said, oh, okay, we'll get our freedom if we fight in the American Revolution. They promised. They didn't get it. Fought in the Civil War. Freedom. You got your freedom from slavery, but then you get Jim Crow laws that put you in this second-class citizenship and allow you to be terrorized, basically, by your fellow citizens. Then you fight in the Spanish-American War. You're like, yes, we're fighting for our country. Eventually, we will get our rights by showing that we are Americans and proving that we are Americans. And that's what they wanted to do. The ROTC program today is set up with the Army and Air Force. And so it's divided into two separate units. In the beginning, it was just the Army ROTC. And because the Air Force was a part of the Army. And then in 1947, it was separated into its own branch. And so that year, Howard created their own Air Force ROTC branch. And one of the things that is unique about the Howard program is that they've always been very innovative in their courses, because they always wanted to make sure that black soldiers were well trained and ready to represent their country well. And so early on, they were receiving awards, and they were being recognized by the Army for being great and for doing great work. Like they won the award for air supply from the Air Force in 1948, a year after they were founded, as the best program over the Citadel and other schools that were training people to be in the Air Force. And that's because they were dedicated and determined to create a strong program that produced good soldiers. And that's one of the things that I think is unique about the Howard program, that it has always strived to be the best, even in spite of racism and in spite of the segregation that black soldiers were going to face. They still said, well, we'll still be the best that we can be.
When I first came to Howard, I always knew that I wanted to fulfill some sort of obligation internally that I felt towards the values of this country. And it felt like the Air Force would be a good way to do that. Originally, I thought I would just try the program and then leave. I came into the detachment and my commander said, walked me through everything that the program was about, and I wasn't sure that I was about that program. And so I actually first tried to back out of ROTC. But I remember a few weeks later, my commander saw me. He was driving along and I was walking down on the sidewalk, and he said, hey, just give it a try. If you like it, you can go for it. If not, you can leave, no obligation. And so I tried it and I'm still here. I think that ROTC has only bolstered my study habits. It's only further enabled me to be able to stay disciplined with what I've done. I always tell people I think that ROTC can be more difficult than going to an academy sometimes, because at an Air Force Academy or at West Point or something like that, people tell you when to eat, they tell you when to sleep, they tell you when to do your laundry, they tell you everything you need to know to live your life. Here in ROTC, you have to create that whole plan yourself. You have to also maintain the academic structure that exists at school. And on top of that, you have a social aspect of things that can be very tempting and distracting when you have all these other things that you're trying to focus on. So I think that really figure out that discipline and balance and time management is something that ROTC has shown me, and something that I've been thankful for, especially at a place as great as Howard. Howard University is an HBCU. It's a historically black college, or university is what the acronym stands for. And I think that for me, it was really hard to justify serving in the military when simultaneously we have all these instances of police brutality. People in Flint, Michigan still don't have clean water. And I think that those other social implications made me really wonder, is this something that I can justify doing? Since the military seems to be directly subservient to this country that seems to neglect my own people in many ways. And so I'll never forget when we have a mandatory summer training that we all have to go to after our sophomore year. It's called field training. And we would go to Maxwell Air Force Base down in Alabama. And I remember one day I got 2 demerits on the first day. If you get 3, you're out. And I really struggled. I really struggled to determine if this was right for me. My Commander would ask us every night, why are you here? Why are you interested in this program? And for a long time I didn't have an answer, but I really had to tune into the values of this country. I had to remember my grandfather, who served in Vietnam back in the 60s, and who was also from Alabama himself, and served his country so faithfully because he believed not in what America was, but in what it could be, what Langston Hughes termed the America to be, right? And so I think that that really inspired me. America was never really great, but it always could be. And that potential was something that inspired me to also commit my life to serving this country as well.
Freshman year, there was a student, my friend Quentin Faulkner. He's actually a lieutenant now in the Army. I saw him in uniform a lot. We had a lot of the same classes. And that first semester was a little rough for me. And I kept looking at him saying, well, what are you doing differently than what am I not doing? And his uniform said it all. You know, he was clean cut, he showed up to class every day on time, he was disciplined, and got good grades. So when I saw that, it actually inspired me to, you know, like try to check it out, see what's going on with the ROTC programs here at Howard. ROTC is not very easy because it's kind of like this weird quasi-student org on your college campus that comes with this requirement, this notion of, oh, like, hey, once you're in, you're stuck. It's a huge commitment. And I think balancing that idea was a little nerve-wracking at first. But looking at, I think what eventually just made me stay was the idea that it was something that I could do. It wasn't something that wasn't too overbearing for me. ROTC actually helped a lot later in life with Russian for me because it gave me the idea to go abroad to actually study there. It also gave me the possibility, well, because I got a scholarship to go to this small little country called Kyrgyzstan in Central Asia. Very unique, very small place. It's at the footstep of the Himalayas. It's very beautiful. But because of ROTC, I had the opportunity to go there, fully funded, and also train under intensive Russian language courses. And so this is something that actually helped a lot in my language now. I actually have a high proficiency now because of this. Going abroad helped a lot with that, and ROTC proved critical in providing an avenue for me to go abroad.
My start to Army, ROTC, and Howard University in general was not the easiest. I didn't come here with a scholarship. I didn't come here with a great GPA or test scores, so I had to work really hard. And if you ask me, I was ranked at the bottom of my class my first day. The first day of ROTC, I sat next to my peers and I was looking over their shoulders, seeing what notes they were taking and whatnot. And I'm laughing because it's a great memory and we all learned and developed together. And through hard work and dedication, I was able to rise and develop thoroughly throughout my time in Army ROTC. The toughest lesson that I've learned and has been consistent through the last 4 years is to be resilient. There are times in ROTC where those around you, your leadership and your peers, they have to push you to see what you're made out of. And so those long stretches where we don't get much reward for our work and it's tough because it's supposed to develop us and train us, those are the times when you have to really be resilient, and that's something that's, like I said, been consistent through my 4 years here. We won't let each other fail too hard, and so I've always had great people next to me to help me through it, but yes, it's been a great learning environment.
I already had my mind set on this is what I wanted to do. I didn't necessarily know what I wanted to do in the Army, but I knew that this was something, a lot of my family members aren't in the military, and so it was something that I could say, well, I started this tradition in my family, or I started this for my younger brother and younger sister. And so I prayed about it, and God told me, this is what I want you to do. I want you to be ministering in the military. And so chaplain came up, and so I said, this is exactly what I want to do. I want to stay here and see this all the way through. The biggest value I feel like I've received from the program is the statement that I can do anything. We have an annual training every year in the summer. And there was a time that I was there and I had to climb a 50-foot alpine tree. I'm not scared of heights, but I got about halfway and I was just like, I can't do it anymore. I'm just gonna come down. And so I saw the cadets down there, I saw the drill sergeants encouraging me to keep going. So I got all the way up to the top and I sat down and looked and saw what I had conquered. and said, if I can get all the way up this 50-foot alpine tree, then I can conquer anything else.
We hosted the joint military ball with the Air Force and Army R.O.T.C, and we also invited their guests. And the cadets planned everything. So we had a couple of Air Force cadets and a couple of Army cadets work together to plan the entire ball, and it was a great success. We had approximately 150 in attendance, and it was really a nice culmination and celebration at the end of the year for all the cadets.
I love this event so much. It was a roller coaster of emotions. When me and my staff were in charge of planning that, and so with planning any event, there's always going to be a little friction once everyone shows up and the ball gets rolling. But it was a great time. I was around people who I love, and we worked so hard these last 4 years. It was pure happiness the entire time.
One of the good things that has happened is they've included women in the program, and they tried to find a way to include women in the 50s and 60s. They had a Miss Co-Ed Cadet who was elected from the student body by the cadets to represent the R.O.T.C. And so she would wear a uniform and take pictures, and you would have that happening. But then in the 1970s, you started to have the first female cadets be allowed into the R.O.T.C. program. And it's really allowed the program to grow and expand.
What we found at our detachment as far as having a female officer, in the office is, I think people really don't have an idea about, especially cadets, considering ROTC, an idea about females being in the military. They always have, a male relative or an uncle or a father who's been in the military, and there's not a lot of stories where, they have a mother, an aunt, or a sister who's in the military. So just to physically see that there is a female in the military with a family and a small child, that it's doable, and it's something that's definitely an avenue for a career.
Being a female in the Army is a lot different than what I thought it would be. The Army is very accepting of females, which is much different from the way that the Army culture was, let's say, 3 to 4 decades ago. I will say that I am happily surprised that they are accepting, but they don't change standards for females. So there are physiologically differences between males and females. And the Army does have fair standards between males and females, which soon might be dismissed. And what we're trying to get to is to the area where we know that you can accomplish the mission based on the physical requirements of your job. So for example, people who are in combat arms might need to have a stronger physical capability versus those that are in support branches. So the difference between female and male currently soon will go away, and then the occupational differences will determine what the physical differences are as far as standards. My special mission here at Howard is to help influence more diversity among the combat arms. So there tends to be a lower % of minorities entering combat arms. However, that is a pipeline for them to become general officers, which is the highest ranking that you can attain in the U.S. Army. So while I am here to help with the overall mission of commissioning lieutenants, it is special focus on exposing them to the combat arms branch and to show them what we can do, and that there are faces like theirs already located in the combat arms and rising.
When ROTC was instituted at Howard, it was a mandatory program. Every male student had to participate in ROTC. Every physically fit male student had to participate in ROTC. I think the period of 1967 to 1968 is a pivotal point in the history of ROTC, because that's where the protests over compulsory ROTC kind of reached their peak. You had Secretary Hershey, who was head of the Selective Service Board. He gave the convocation speech in 1968, and the students actually protested at convocation, marched out of convocation, hung him in effigy, and burned him on the tree that's in front of Douglas Hall, which I'm amazed it's still standing, because they burned a lot of people in effigy at that tree. But they actually burned him in effigy in protest over the ROTC, because they said we do not want compulsory ROTC because of the oath you have to take, because we don't want to be forced to fight for a nation that doesn't support black people. And so there are a lot of things going on over this idea that we don't want compulsory ROTC. They did a sit-in in President James DeBritt's office over compulsory ROTC, and it really caused a rancor on campus, because you have to remember this is the point of Vietnam. And so they're protesting the Vietnam War, they're protesting the US's involvement in it, and here you have required ROTC at what they want to be a black university. They're saying we don't need to do this. And they actually succeeded in having the requirement taken away because of these protests. And so that's really something to remember when you look at the history of ROTC at Howard and what's kind of shaped what it is today.
Colors, present arms.
One of the things that's also unique about the ROTC program here at Howard is that it's more of a consortium program. And starting in the late 1980s, all of the ROTC students in the District of Columbia received their training here at Howard, even if they weren't students at Howard. So if you're a student at American and you're in ROTC, you come here to do your ROTC training, even though you're a student at another university and you have a program at another university, but they all come here to train. And so if you get here early, like I get here at 6:30 in the morning, you see them on the yard marching and in formation, and these are all cadets from the entire DC area. And that's pretty unique to DC, that you have all of the universities have sort of one program.
We have classes at 6 in the morning on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, and basically all the cadets from all the other campuses get here best way they can. They usually carpool, they might Uber, but they all work together to make sure that they all get here on time and where they need to be. So there's definitely a lot of logistics and coordinating, but our cadets are so professional and they get here on time and ready to learn.
The two most important days in a person's life are the day you are born and then the day you figure out why you were born. If you go back into the history and you look at all the great examples of the men and women that have been through the programs, you will see significant impact not only to our armed forces, but to society. And I think this is what the power of ROTC is all about. I think this will continue on for many years to come. We want diversity. We want variety. We want the very best that our population brings. And ROTC allows that to come to the top. And the end result, great men and women like today who've already started to sacrifice, right? And that's what they've done. Where they could have been at other things, doing other things, sleeping in late, going to a party. Instead, they chose early physical fitness, road marches, extra exams, uniform inspections, land navigation, rifle marksmanship training, leadership and discipline drills, and that together with the academic capability that's given to them makes them special people.
I think that Howard's ROTC program should be most proud of the fact that they have been an example of black excellence. And in spite of the early racism that they faced in the military, they were able to be successful. They were able to build one of the top programs in the nation, that they were able to produce soldiers who won Purple Hearts, who've earned the Navy Cross, who've earned these honors in the military for military service, even in spite of racism.
Our values fit right off into the Howard University's mission, truth and service.
Truth and service go hand in hand with the U.S. Army values, and it's very simple to go straight from the 7 Army values, which is loyalty, duty, respect, honor, integrity, and personal courage, they're basically synonymous.
I hope that the legacy of the ROTC program at Howard is one that continues to remember its history, one that continues to produce well-trained soldiers who represent the university as well as the nation well, and that it continues to be a strong, robust program that is one of the top in the nation.
This program was produced by WHUT, Howard University Television, and made possible by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.